Welcome back. This is day 17 of the Choose Life quest. The key concept we're going to cover today is that by identifying our weaknesses, we find the places where there is the most opportunity for God to work in us. Let's get into understanding this a little bit better. Pick something that you're really good at. Maybe it's public speaking. Maybe you have great people skills, or you're really good with numbers or details or figuring out systems to do things better. Think of something that you just excel at naturally, automatically. Now, I'm not talking about job skills or hobbies. I can't play the clarinet. That's not a weakness, it's just something I don't have the skills to do. I'm talking about innate character traits that you have, things that you are naturally really good at. Think of one of those things. Now that you have that one thing you're really good at, imagine if you're 90% as good as you could ever be at that thing. You could get 5% better and be almost perfect. But how much time and effort would it take to get that much better? Now, imagine something that is a weakness for you, something that you are just poor at innately. From a biblical perspective, why do our weaknesses matter? How is being aware of them and accepting them as weaknesses something that's good for us? What advantage do we derive? 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness." This is Paul praying for the thorn in the flesh that he's alluded to several times to be taken away. And God says, no, my grace, the gifts that God does give, is sufficient for you. Therefore, he continues in verse 9, "I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. That is why, for the sake of Christ, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." The difference between strengths and weaknesses is who gets the credit. It's all too easy when we look at our inborn strengths, the things that we naturally excel at, to feel good about ourselves, at how we are able to accomplish things. It is an inward-focused pride if we're not careful. And although that it's God who's given us the talents, the abilities, the blessings, the proficiencies of being able to do all these wonderful things, if we're not careful, it's all too easy to take the credit for what we are able to do, to take ownership of what we're good at. But in contrast, when we have a weakness, something that we are fully aware of and accept is not something that we naturally are very good at, when we acknowledge our weakness in an area, whatever improvements, whatever advances we make in that area, we don't take the credit. And when we start from that place of humility and self-awareness, any improvements that we do make, any accomplishments we do achieve, it is easy to give God the glory and the credit for those things when it's clearly Him who's making us able to do something we're not naturally good at. Maybe you, like me, are not very patient sometimes. And one day you find yourself in a situation that you just know is going to require so much more patience than what you have automatically, that you know is going to push you so far beyond what you can gracefully handle. But by acknowledging that through prayer and turning to God, asking Him for the strength and the patience to deal with that situation in not the way that you automatically would, but in the way that you deeply want to, then you can find a peace and patience that you know does not come from inside of you. Those are the circumstances where it is so easy, so abundantly clear that God gets all the glory. Not because you did something you didn't think you were able to, but because you realize there's no way you could have done the thing that happened. God gets the glory, whether it's in your own heart going over that circumstance again, or sharing that story with others and sharing how God has helped you do something you're not normally able to. And that's not to mention the benefit that applies to others, the people in that situation with you, who directly, I'm sure, benefited from you outperforming your own limitations by the grace and power of God. The key here is when we are able to admit and accept our own failures and shortcomings, then and only then can we truly grasp where we need to put our faith. Not in our own abilities, but in God's strength and power working in our lives. By admitting our faults and turning to God to make up the difference, we tap into a source of power that's so much greater than ourselves. And it all starts by taking the most counterintuitive of steps, by taking a good, hard, critical look at ourselves in the mirror, by intentionally finding, recognizing, and accepting our own flaws. Now, this does not by any means mean embracing those flaws and weaknesses, or making excuses about why we have them or can't get rid of them, or least of all, claiming them as part of our identity. That's just how I am. We're not meant to get comfortable with our weaknesses, but accepting, recognizing that they're there is the critical starting point for realizing where we need to put our faith and draw our power from. When we acknowledge our flaws and our weaknesses for what they are, we see all the more clearly where we need God the most. So, for a short exercise today, take a few moments to consider these two questions and write down what you find. What do you think in your heart is your greatest shortcoming? Go deep, don't be afraid. Finding this flaw, recognizing it for what it is the start to growing beyond it. And two, this may be even more uncomfortable. What do you think the people closest to you would say your greatest flaw is? Your wife, your children, your parents, your close, long-term friends. If you asked them and they were being unflinchingly honest, what would they tell you your greatest shortcoming is? This can be a very uncomfortable process on the surface to even consider answering these questions. Our ego, our carnal self, probably doesn't want to admit or acknowledge that it has any flaws whatsoever, let alone the deep, foundational ones. So don't try to shortcut this process. Take some time. Pray about this. Unpack all of the different objections, excuses, justifications that I'm sure that your thinking brain, your ego, is going to come up with. Be willing to just recognize those and set them aside. Pray for the clarity to see what's down there deep, what you need to recognize in order to grow beyond it. Because tomorrow we're going to take what you've written down, all of these shortcomings, and get into the next step. After recognizing them, what do we do to move past them? So get ready to start turning your weaknesses into strengths, and I'll see you tomorrow.